I'm delighted that so many people have turned up today to this important event, recognising the Quiet Peacebuilders, those everyday people who've worked tirelessly in our streets and our communities across Northern Ireland and across this island to support peace and reconciliation. I'm sure other people will mention it. The one person who would love to be here today is Pat Hume, because Pat Hume was a person who always supported reconciliation, and she worked with so many people in Derry and across this island and wider on grassroots issues. So she would be delighted, and she was always the person who argued that the Hume Foundation should highlight the issue of reconciliation. So we should remember her today. And before I start, there is a number of people, obviously, in recent times who worked in peace and reconciliation who have passed. Only in the last week, Derek Wilson has passed away, May Blood has passed away, and there's a number of others that from the community who worked so tirelessly in cross-community work and peace and reconciliation. So we just want to take a moment. Derek Wilson actually was nominated for this, but obviously he wasn't able to make it today, and that's a real tragedy, but his work in Coromita was... So I suppose you all know people in your own streets and communities that played a part over the past who are no longer with us. So we're just going to take a moment to reflect on the work of those people who are no longer with us in terms of peace and reconciliation. Thank you. We're lucky today to have not only the wonderful and courageous nominees, but there's many friends and supporters. I think Breezy Willow has won the fan zone. I think she's brought more people with her than anybody else. And you'll hear more about Breezy Willow, but you might have tasted some of her baking at the back. But I think she's brought more fans from across the north and the south than anybody else. But I know there's many families and friends and colleagues and youth workers who've joined us today as well, so you're very welcome. I want to introduce the first set of speakers. Obviously, we have the colourful and wonderful Councillor, the Mayor of Derry, Councillor Lilian Seenoi Barr, who has done an amazing job for the city, and we're delighted that you're able to honour us in this beautiful building, and it looks spectacular for Christmas. So thank you for coming. Mark Durkan, from the John and Pat Hume Foundation, obviously former Member of Parliament for Foyle, and has been a dedicated servant of the Hume Foundation, and obviously was very, very close to John and Pat Hume. And Paddy Hart is here from the International Fund for Ireland, who probably supports some of the organisations. I think I saw some of these putting a few applications in his back pocket for future funding applications. I'm sure he'll take that very seriously. But Paddy has been a loyal supporter through the work of IFI and personally to the work of so many of the organisations on the ground, supporting peace and reconciliation and especially cross-border work. And obviously, lastly at this stage is Daphne Trimble, the wife of David Trimble, who won the Nobel Peace Prize 26 years ago with John Hume. And obviously it's nearly a year ago, Daphne, that we were here celebrating the moment that the Nobel Peace Lecture was given 26 years ago. And that was a wonderful day to acknowledge the work of John and David. And I think this is a continuum because obviously it's important to recognise those politically and internationally who played such a prominent role in building the peace that we have. But obviously you were the people on the ground who kept people safe, kept people alive, and brought communities together, north and south. So today it's really important to recognise the people on the ground. The one person who's missing is Breeze Rogers. She's in Donegal and she's got a very bad flu. And she's 90, maybe I shouldn't say that. She's 90 next February. She's a remarkable woman who's been involved in civil rights to her work politically and as a minister and beyond. And she's still very fit and well. And she tells me off regularly, that's how fit and well she is, but she's got a very bad flu and she wishes she was here and she apologises that she couldn't be here today, but we send her best wishes, and that's why Paddy Hart has stepped in as who's funding this celebration. I also want to acknowledge the work of the Peace Summit partners Dimna McGlade, Anne Carr, members. There's a number of people here today who've been involved in the Peace Summit exercise over the last 12 months that IFI have supported. I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I want to acknowledge their work, especially Dimna in terms of the nominees, along with Jerry Cosgrove, who's on the advisory council, and Lauren Kerr, who's on our foundation board. So if you want to blame anybody about your being the final nominees, Dimna is the one here today that you can beat up. But some people have asked me who nominated them. I said it's secret. So you can take Dimna as that. And lastly but not least, obviously, the Department of Foreign Affairs. Again, the Irish government have done so much over the decades to support reconciliation through the Reconciliation Fund, and they support many of the organisations here, and the support of the Hume Foundation as well, and we thank that as well. I'll acknowledge later Terry Cross, because there's a couple of bottles of wine to my right that maybe we'll open before the end of proceedings. So could I call on Mark Durkan, a member of the Hume Foundation board, to do a welcome on behalf of the board.
Madam Mayor, today's honorees, fellow guests, it's great to be here in this fantastic setting, just as we head into the season of Advent, and to see the building in such splendour, but more importantly to be in such splendid company. As Tim has said, I serve on the board of the John and Pat Hume Foundation. I worked for many years for John as his assistant, and then succeeded him as MP in the city as well. But also you work with him throughout the peace process, and everybody has got their own dates historically as to how they measure the peace process, and of course it's still an ongoing mission, an ongoing enterprise that so many of you are still committed to and still give work and inspiration to as well. I also was part of the negotiations of the Good Friday Agreement, and then served in the institutions of the agreement, both as Finance Minister and as Deputy First Minister, including serving alongside David Trimble. So worked with John, worked with David, and in all of that effort of the peace process, we might have been caught in a situation where a lot of the focus was on the politics and the political interplay, but the driving inspiration for so much of the work was the reality of issues that people were facing, and the real prospect that many people were nourishing and cherishing, that there could be better days, there were better ways, and there could be better says for people than just all of the frustrated suffering and divisiveness that was going on. And so that was all part of informing and forming the peace process. I was sort of embarrassingly last year, I was invited to Coventry, and along with Paul Bew, who had worked with David at the time of the Good Friday Agreement and in difficult years after the Good Friday Agreement, Paul Bew and I were being awarded the Coventry International Peace Prize. And that was supposed to be as to mark the 25th anniversary of the agreement. And they said they had chosen Paul Bew and I because they wanted to show that when there's negotiations and peace processes, it's not always the frontline politicos, etc., that matter. And as I say, I was embarrassed by this. Now, you didn't get doing a big acceptance speech or anything else, but as part of a panel that I was on, and it was people from right across parties in Northern Ireland before the award, I had made the point that I think our peace process might be better understood if people looked at it as a long, slow murmuration in which all sorts of people were involved. There was a multitude of starlings involved in our peace process. They weren't all political players and political parties, and they weren't all working at a time whenever the media had said there's a peace process on and that word came into parlance. Our peace process, our long, slow murmuration involved an awful lot of work going on. It might have appeared to be random, it might have appeared to be remote, it might have appeared to be disconnected, but people in this room who are receiving awards today and others were all carrying out that work with their own sense of purpose, with their own sense of integrity. They didn't need the permission of the media to tell them there was a process that was on that they were part of. They were responding to the difficulties and the challenges and the suffering in their community. They were also responding to the hopes that they still knew that people held in their hearts, in spite of all of the divisions, all of the difficulties, all of the deprivations, and all of the challenges. And that's what today is about, remembering that the peace we owe is not just to people who negotiated an agreement or signed it or whatever. Let's remember the agreement that we have now on this island was signed by everybody who voted for it with a pencil. That's who signed it, not all the big names and the faces or whatever that get talked about whenever a 25th anniversary conference comes about. And the investment in that, to deliver that level of understanding and that sense of will and accommodation, came from people doing everyday work that wasn't every day in anybody else's normal sense of that term. It was people who were going out every day just trying to narrow the gap between what is or what was and what ought to be. People who were trying to keep hope alive. People who are trying to make sure that people could see the better side of themselves and the better side of others as we worked through challenges. So people who you were working to try to emancipate your community economically, socially, keep the fabric of community together as divisions spread and as segregation widened. And people who were able to move initiatives, mobilise hope around social projects, economic projects, community-based projects, including one supported by the International Fund and subsequently then by the European Union. That's the class of work that has made up the fabric of our peace process. So often we can have a lot of concentration on what happens among people who are in the corridors of power. We need far more concentration and celebration of the people who are doing work on the streets, on the ground, in the schools, in the community halls, in the sports grounds. And that's what the idea of recognising the Quiet Peacebuilders is about. And as Tim has mentioned, Pat was particularly emphatic about the hope that the foundation that she was agreeing would be formed, originally in John's name, and then she very, very reluctantly agreed that her name could be attached to it too. But she played great stress on making sure that we recognised the Quiet Peacebuilders, people who went about making sure things didn't get worse, holding the line for hope and for decency and for self-regard, for self-respect and for mutual respect, and then also building that sense of resilience and that sense of purpose that underpinned the peace process. And remember, whenever the peace process did become more live in terms of political recognition, in terms of political structures and political systems, remember that peace process in turn ended up having to rely on exactly that fabric of community work and community endeavour. And that's why things like the International Fund continue to be important, funding and supporting that work. That's why the European Union special programme continued to be so important as well. And so it is important that there is direct acknowledgement of the importance of that work. So it may not appear to be joined up, it may not appear to be connected in that sort of way, but that image of the long, slow murmuration, which, you know, it might appear chaotic and things might appear to crash, but every now and again there's a confluence, there's a degree of convergence, and things take on shape, and things take on a hopeful and a purposeful shape. And then, as with the murmuration, it sometimes frays away again and all the rest of it. And when those things fray away politically and the media think stuff's moved on and stuff's moved away, we end up relying again on those people who maintain and nourish that fabric of hope, those people who want to show ownership for the prospects and the purpose that a process that's meant to be about peace and reconciliation offer. And the people who we're awarding today know that nothing ended in that sense with the achievement of the Good Friday Agreement, etc. Some bad things hopefully ended, some other things were put behind, but not completely. Not all of our problems were behind us, but you knew that all of our hopes and all of our opportunities were ahead of us, and you still hold out those hopes and those opportunities. And so we're making these awards today, not just in recognition of that contribution, but also to encourage others to look to the value of that contribution and be inspired by the value of that contribution, so that the young people who have been involved in very important dialogues and interesting dialogues like the Peace Summit, as Tim referred to and you're going to hear more about later, we want those young people to be inspired by your work, by your worth, by the relevance and the importance and the integrity of what you have all stood for and what you all have done, and not just to be listening to, you know, all of the names and the titles or whatever that are sometimes bandied about in relation to the peace process. So this is a way of saying thank you for all that you have done, all you continue to do, and we hope people draw inspiration from you, and we hope that you take some appreciation away today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for those fine words. It is an absolute honour for me to welcome Mayor Councillor Lilian Seenoi Barr to her office, some office to come into every day. She has been an inspiration since she got involved with the North West Migrant Forum in terms of issues, and I think she is a role model for every young person, especially young women, in terms of her role as Mayor of Derry. So, Lilian, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I am absolutely delighted to be here this morning and privileged as both an elected member of the Social Democratic Labour Party and as Mayor of Derry City and Strabane District Council to address this incredible event organized by the John and Pat Hume Foundation and supported by the International Fund for Ireland. I wish to extend a very warm welcome to all the nominees who are being honored today, and a warm welcome to Daphne Trimble, Paddy Hart from the International Fund for Ireland, and for our very own Derry man who just spoke after me, representing the John Hume and Pat Hume Foundation, someone who I call an encyclopedia of the peace process, the troubles in Ireland, and also everything that we need to know about the Good Friday Agreement. It is unfortunate that Breed Rogers cannot join us due to illness, and we want to wish her all the best and a swift recovery. This occasion is especially bittersweet because one person who would have loved to be here today, the late Pat Hume, is not here with us. Pat was a remarkable, humble woman who always put others first. Her life was dedicated to reconciliation, and she understood the profound impact of everyday peacemakers. John and Pat Hume were more than leaders. They were visionaries. Together, they imagined a future where differences did not divide but enriched us. And they worked tirelessly to make that vision a reality. They demonstrated that peace is not just the absence of violence, it is the presence of justice, opportunity, and mutual respect. Their legacy is deeply personal to me. As someone who came to Derry from another land seeking safety, opportunity, belonging, and hope, I often reflect on what their work has meant. Because of the peace they championed, I was not only able to build a life here, but also was able to give the space for peace and to dream. Today, I stand before you as mayor, humbled and honored, a living testament that John and Pat Hume's dream of a more inclusive and united society is alive and thriving. But today is not just about John and Pat Hume. It is about the quiet peacemakers, the unsung heroes whose names may not fill history books, but whose actions have written the story of peace. These individuals worked tirelessly in their communities during the darkest times, built bridges where walls threatened to rise, and showed extraordinary courage in the face of conflict. Their grassroots efforts, act of kindness, relentless resistance to hate, and unwavering commitment to peace laid the foundation of which our present rests. They reminded us that peace is not a single event, but a daily commitment, sustained not only by political leaders or agreements, but by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. To the 25 individuals, we celebrate you today. You are the embodiment of what it means to put service above self and to hold onto hope even in the darkest time. Your dedication shows us that peace is not a destination, but a journey, one that requires constant nurturing, courage, and faith. I am particularly inspired by the presence of young people from the Foil Learning Network and youth organizations here today. You are the future, the torchbearers of the peace that was so hard on. Your energy, ideas, and commitment will shape the next chapter of our shared story, ensuring that peace not only endures, but thrives. I also wish to applaud the work of the Peace Summit 2024 partners, who through extensive consultation with communities, peace builders, civil society, and young people have designed an inclusive peace plan to tackle the unfinished business of peace. Your call for a multi-agency reconciliation task force to integrate government and community-led efforts, ensure reconciliation proofing, and enhance youth participation, and properly fund grassroots peace building is both timely and essential. And as John Hume once said, difference is of the essence of humanity. Difference is an accident of birth, and it should therefore never be the source of hatred or conflict. The answer to difference is to respect it. Therein lies a most fundamental principle of peace, respect for diversity. Let us draw strength from the quiet peacemakers we honor today. Let their stories inspire us to continue building bridges, fostering understanding, and championing justice. Let us honor John and Pat Hume by embodying their legacy. Let us honor those unsung heroes by ensuring their sacrifices were not in vain. And let us honor the young people here today by leaving them a society even better than the one we have inherited. And congratulations to the peacemakers we celebrate today. You are the heart of this city, this district, and these islands. Thank you very much.
Lilian, thanks so much for that. Those wonderful, inspirational words. And I'm sure the young people here present today will. We are recording this today, so each of the nominees will be doing a video message about their work and their hopes for the future. We'll put that together as a collective, which again will go on our websites and IFI's websites and others, so other people will be able to hear this today. I want to introduce Daphne Trimble, and obviously, John and David Trimble won the Nobel Peace Prize together. But I'm delighted that on many of the events we've done, we've worked closely with Daphne Trimble. Indeed, it's important to remember that the John and Pat Hume Foundation is a cross-community organisation. It's chaired now as John Hume Jr., but we have Dawn Purvis as our vice chair, and there's many people from different walks of life who knew John, but equally there's people from wider traditions in the north and the south on our committee. So it's very important today for us to reflect all the narratives that come in. People support and are inspired by the principles of John and Pat Hume and want to see them grow and thrive. I was just thinking before about Daphne, and obviously you will have experienced this yourself as peace builders in your communities, and I'll talk about it more later on about some of the challenges. But again, it's not easy being a politician. It's not easy being a politician's wife. And Pat Hume and Daphne, through the Good Friday Agreement negotiations, I'm sure had to put up with a hell of a lot. But in their own right, they were very courageous. I always remember the referendum campaign, and there was a rally or meeting that Dulce Unionists were holding, and there was a counter-protest, and Daphne and David had to be escorted out of the premises by police. But as she was getting in the car, there was protesters kicking her literally in the ankles as she did that. So it takes a lot of courage to stand up for your community and stand up for politics. But Pat and Daphne did have a very good working relationship, and they were the first heads of the Memorial Fund that was set up, which is the precursor to support victims and survivors. So they work closely in that today. And in terms of the Peace Summit proposals, there's still an issue around in terms of the support that's given to victims and survivors. So Daphne, we're delighted you're able to attend, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Tim. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here today and to see all the quiet peacemakers here and being honoured. And a massive congratulations to the John and Pat Hume Foundation for organising this event. These matters are really important, and we must not forget that people have, like yourselves, have worked very hard together and just, sorry, I'm not as tall as everybody else. And I hope you can see me over the lectern. That's also sometimes a problem for me. But, yes, David and John were at one time the leaders of unionism and of nationalism, and they worked together to try and create a peace agreement. They didn't agree on everything. In fact, there were times when they might have found it difficult to work out what they did agree on, but eventually, after a good many years of talking backwards and forwards and going back to their own communities and their own political bodies, the 1998 peace agreement happened. And it was a leap into the dark. Neither of them got everything that they wanted, but David always said to me, the big question is not, do you get everything you want, but do you get enough? In other words, is it good enough? And they both made the judgment in 1998 that, yes, it was good enough. And the people of Northern Ireland came out in the referendum, and they also agreed that it was good enough. And so we got the Assembly, and the Assembly is still there. 26 years later, that's quite an accolade, I think, for the ending of any conflict, whatever you like to call the troubles. They ended, and we are where we are today with a predominantly peaceful society. It's not absolutely peaceful, as all of you will know. It requires work. I'm just going to say a little bit about the work that Pat Hume and I did together. Tim alluded to that. In 1998, the Hume family and the Trimble family and the SDLP and the Ulster Unionist Party departed en masse for Oslo for the Nobel celebrations. And the ceremony lasted for 3 days, and there were parties every night, and we all had a really good time. But that, for me, that was the first time that I had ever really got to know Pat. We'd met before, just, sort of, hello, shake hands, how are you, and that sort of thing. But in those 3 days, she and I got together and had lots of chats, lots of quiet little chats together, and we were quietly optimistic about how things would go back home in Northern Ireland when we got back home. And we thought, the guys, and it was predominantly guys, the guys have made the agreement, what will the two of us do? And we thought that the best thing that we could do to help matters on their way would to be to work with victims. And so when we got back home, the Northern Ireland Memorial Fund had just been launched. The Northern Ireland office had given £1 million under the chairmanship of the Vice-Chancellor, then Vice-Chancellor of Queen's, George Bain. And Pat and I blagged our way onto the board. And, well, I won't say we took it over, but anything that we suggested was accepted. And at that point, the board had been talking about having a couple of conferences that could easily spend close to £1 million if you did a little bit. But Pat and I suggested that we work with individual victims of the Troubles and try and give help. And that suggestion was received with open arms, and that is where the Northern Ireland Memorial Fund carried out all its work. And Pat and I travelled the country, meeting with victims and meeting with groups, and we also went on fundraising trips to the United States, where we spoke to all sorts of people, and I would like to pay tribute to the Ireland Funds for assisting us in that. And we really got to know each other extremely well during that work, and it was good and important work. We carried that on for well over 10 years until it was mainstreamed into the Victims Commissioner, and that work still continues to this day. So Pat and I we were more than colleagues. We became really close friends over that time. So I think it's perfectly right that this should be the John and Pat Hume Foundation. She did, like myself, keep more to the back room, but she was a very, very big force for good within Northern Ireland. So, sorry, I haven't really prepared my remarks, but I know that there are a large number of people in this room who have worked really hard together, cross-community, within their own communities. I look forward to the day when we don't have to talk about cross-community work anymore, where we're only one community and all Northern Irish, or whatever we want to be, British Irish, Irish, British, Northern Irish, where it doesn't matter what we call ourselves, that we are all one community. And I do believe that we're heading in that direction. I know there are a few young people in the room today, and I'd like to think that that is what they feel about the future, that there is a sense of ownership of this part of the world, that everybody who lives here can join together as in a feeling of unity. So the work that you people are doing is very, very important, and congratulations to you all, and keep it up.
Thanks, Daphne. The last speaker before the awards is Paddy Hart, and obviously he's the chairman of the International Fund for Ireland, but obviously the Hart name in Donegal goes a long way, and obviously his father worked with Barr on many reconciliation projects, especially around Meban in France. So he's very welcome. As I said, he's put a huge amount of energy and time, as the IFI generally have had since they were set up in 1986 to support originally economic matters as well, and as peace and reconciliation programmes as well. But I'm sure you recognise, in a time when there's been difficult financing or no government, sometimes the executive's funding for peace and reconciliation works has been more limited, and without the support of the Ireland Fund certainly, but the International Fund specifically, and the Department of Foreign Affairs Reconciliation Fund, some of the really good work that you've undertaken on the ground would not have happened. So, Paddy, we're delighted you're here, and we look forward to your comments.
Thanks, Tim, for kind words. It's an absolute pleasure and honour to be standing here before you today, and somewhat humbling, personally, when I listened to the fabulous words and the elegant way in which they were spoken today, in terms of what everyday peace building actually means. And I'm delighted that Tim said it's going to be recorded, because I think the words of firstly of Mark and of the Mayor and of Daphne, in terms of what that actually means, couldn't say it any better. So the advantage of speaking after those people is that I have your attention. The disadvantage is that they've said everything worth saying really, really, really eloquently. So with that, I'm here with my colleagues from the fund, Anne Carr from our board and Patrick Smith from our secretariat. When I think of everyday peace builders, I think of them very quickly from the environment in which I grew up, and I grew up right on the border. So Strabane was my town, and Donegal, and Letterkenny wasn't. So I can think of so many people, as all of you can. And I'm always drawn to Isaac Newton quote, as if I see further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And I have no doubt that John Hume and David Trimble stood on the shoulders of quiet peacemakers to see further and to have the vision for the peaceful and shared society that we have. And I might just take a moment to think of one of them, Father John Doherty. Father John, Derry man, wee Willie Doherty, from people of a certain age will remember wee Willie Doherty. Played at my wedding, our wedding, and the band mama would never let me off with that, not saying that. And I remember Father John, and this is in the 70s. This is when young people, like the young people who are here today, were living in darkness. We're living with every day what was going to happen today on your way to school, what was going to happen on your way home from school, what was going to happen if you were going to your football training, or if you were going to the youth club. Would you get there? Would you get back? And most people of that generation would remember all of that. And Father John Doherty had a choir of young people in the youth club. Any Strabane people here will remember the Ventures. If you mention the Ventures in Strabane today, they did a record. They travelled all over the place. You can still see a smile in people's faces, because in all of the darkness of the troubles, or whatever people would want to call them, they still remember this light in the darkness. And that's the heart of what everyday peace building and peacemaking is about. Now, I was very taken by the John and Pat Hume Foundation. Everyone has said what needs to be, important things that need to be said about John and Pat, both of whom were friends, family friends of ours. And thanks, Tim, for mentioning this. My dad was in the middle of lots of this, and not to the same extent as Daphne, but my mum, there was 9 of us. My dad was aware of a lot of this stuff, so lots of the things that my dad got right, and lots of the things that he didn't do were predominantly down to my mum. Just the ordinariness of making sure that life stayed normal in the midst of all of this. I'd like also to acknowledge the Peace Summit. all the sharing of thoughts and experiences that they're doing means that we're having a much richer look at where we are, where we came from, and where we go next. Very taken by the work of the summit and the role that the John Pat Hume Foundation has played in that. And I would like to acknowledge, I would think, a very central role that the Peace Summit has played in peace being a cross-cutting theme in the programme for government. It's so incredible. There's always a risk that as we talk about grassroots and we talk about community, that doesn't involve everyone. There is an African saying that says it takes a village to raise a child. A good adaptation of that is it takes a community to build a peace process. And in the words of John Paul Lederach, the renowned peace advocate, he said that the legacy of violence teaches us that when our wider social fabric is torn, stitching will require all of us, not just the community sector as we tend to define it. We all live in communities. We all have a responsibility to play our part, and I think, Mayor, you called them acts of kindness, everyday acts of kindness, and I think that's the real essence of how peace moves forward. You may have noticed in our branding, we have updated our branding to take account of a changing circumstance, and our strapline and our branding is everyday peace building, and I think that's the next stage as we build or take ourselves out of the absence of violence and sometimes people call a negative peace. I don't think so. I think a relatively good peace. We're in a relatively good position. Just the young people that are here today, the life of young people in previous generations was nothing. They didn't have lots of the time the lives you have. So you owe some or a lot of the freedoms and the lives you live today to them. However, there's a lot of work still needs to be done, and the work that the Peace Summit sets the frame so it is not only the community. We play a significantly important role in this because that's at the interface of everyone's world is in the community, but it also means that government departments now have to peace-proof what they're doing, which means that policies will now come into play. That means that peace building is a really important part of all of that. In terms of the fund, International Vote itself, many of you know it. I would just like to acknowledge the financial, political and personal support that we get from the British and Irish governments, from the United States, from Canada, New Zealand and Australia, because without their interventions, we wouldn't have financial resources to support things like today. I can't tell you how pleased I am actually that today's happening. It is at the heart of what will sustain peace. There is always a risk that the leaders, as tend to be described as the top of the organisations, deserve the accolades that they get. The risk is that the advocacy of everyone else doesn't get. You don't notice your role. You don't notice that that's important, and you tend to wait for the next person who's going to do the next big leadership thing. Whereas in fact, everyday leaders are the reasons why the more visible leaders can do what they do. And there's a little video by a guy called Drew Dudley, Canadian, and it's called Everyday Leadership. So look at it sometime. But again, so pleased, and I couldn't overstate just how much I admire people who took those enormous personal risks and extraordinarily difficult times and continue to do it in the face of all sorts of adversity. And you are here today, and the community of all of you are the people who should be celebrated on an ongoing basis, so that everyone knows that peace in this society, in this island, in Europe and in the world is down to everyday peace builders like yourselves. So thanks for listening, and again, congratulations.
Thanks, Paddy. There's one addition to the programme that's not on the programme that you've got. So if Jennifer and Killian Halpin could take the stage. Daphne's mentioned earlier about the Oslo trip. I'm sure maybe over a glass of wine or two, and Mark might be able to help with us, tell some of the stories at the after parties in Oslo. I'm sure that went late into the night. But it was only last week when I was in London with Mark that I realised I knew that Phil Coulter, Derry man, played, and I knew that the Cranberries had played at the Oslo show. I didn't know that there were a range of other rock artists, including Phil Collins and Alanis Morissette. I'm not sure what their connection with John and Pat Hume was. I know. Your husband was big into, was it Elvis? But I'm not sure about Alanis Morissette. So we're lucky now to have Jennifer and Killian. This is a song written by Mary Pat Kelly, a very good loyal friend of John and Pat, and it's called You Left Us With a Word, and it's very appropriate. It's a song for Pat Hume.
You left us with a word, trust is what you said, asking you'll be heard, believe and you'll be led. You told us you were blessed, beyond what you could say, and knowing ere the test that everything would be okay, and love would find a way, love would find a way, through all the troubled years, those paralyzing fears, you've somehow kept us right, walking toward the light, and always you were kind, that trust embracing smile, in your presence we could find some comfort for a little while. Trust that was your word, you left us with that word. When you had to leave, too soon, it's true. You told us not to grieve, said I'd look after you, and promised I'd look after you. You left us with a word, trust is what you said, ask and you'll be heard, believe and you'll be led. You told us you were blessed, beyond what you could say, and knowing ere the test that everything would be okay, that love would find a way, and love did find a way. Your love showed us the way.
Thank you so much, Killian and Jennifer. That was beautiful. And Mary Pat, thank you for writing that. I'm sure that will go viral, hopefully, and many, many more people can hear it. Now, I know there's a number of people out there very nervous because they're going to receive awards. Is that right, Stevie? Stevie Hughes is wearing a suit today, the first time in his life. Well, maybe this is the day you got married, but this is the most important part of the day, because obviously we're recognising the Quiet Peacebuilders. Fergal Keane in 2017 wrote an article at that particular time, and obviously he was a war correspondent and obviously suffered from PTSD, but he saw things that probably nobody wanted to see. But he talked about Northern Ireland and our peace, and he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers who were there from the start." And he was talking about John Hume and others, But really, he wasn't talking about any politician. He was talking about the people like yourself on the ground who were there from the very beginning. Others people were very grateful they became peacemakers, and that's important because we saw an end of violence through the Good Friday Agreement. But there's so many quiet, courageous voices in communities who were there from the very start, and they're there today. So that's who we are recognising today. So we're going to call up each individual nominee, and if you come up the stage, Paddy and Daphne will give you your certificate, and there is a small gift from the John and Pat Hume Foundation. And I mentioned Terry Cross earlier on. Terry Cross is a wonderful supporter of the Hume Foundation, integrated education, and he's the president of the Northern Ireland Red Cross as well. So he's very kind. He's got a distillery outside Belfast and Carryduff, and he's very kindly donated a bottle of wine for each of the nominees on the proviso that you open it before you leave here today. So, with no further ado, I'll start. Can I invite Elaine, Burns, O'Kane, So Elaine has for 35 years been a dedicated advocate for social justice and community empowerment, particularly within North Belfast. And she's been a key figure in the North Belfast Advice Partnership and has worked on many issues including housing, financial stability and supporting those most in housing stress. So obviously, and she just in 2016 founded the ABC Trust. So congratulations, Elaine Burns. Next, we have Janice Beggs, who grew up near the interface in Clifton Park Avenue, where she still resides, and has served as a community centre manager for the Lower Hull Park Community Station for 15 years. And she's played a key role in the IFI Peace Barriers project and has been instrumental in enhancing community participation and regeneration efforts. The next person is Davy Adams, but Davy Adams is in Dublin today, and obviously Davy was a former loyalist paramilitary and a politician, but he obviously severed his links with them many, many decades ago. Interestingly, he's been working for Goal in Africa and the Middle East for 15 years and received the Ebola Medal for his work in Sierra Leone. He's one of our peace guardians, and he's written very much around peace and reconciliation today, and we will honour him in due course. Next, can I call Anne-Marie Bell forward? Anne-Marie grew up in the Chantalo during the Troubles, and conflict was everyday life for her. And she has been a volunteer at her local youth club and has been involved with Pennyburn Youth Club since 1995. She strived to work to empower young people through encourage them to look beyond religion, discrimination and sectarianism. Congratulations. Bethany Muir is next. You can tell Bethany always by the colour of her hair. I'm going to get it like that the next time. Bethany is a young feminist activist from Derry. During COVID, she trained as an abortion doula and has worked at Co-Facility Alliance for Choice. She was Student Junior Welfare Officer at Queen's University, and she currently works with the Foyle Network Foundation. Can I call on Damien McNally? Damien has worked in the field of peace building for many years and has been involved with Wave Trauma Centre since 2002 and was chair from 2007-2014. He's a trauma educator, and he also works with the Community Relations Council, and he has been working in peace building since the loss of his father, who was killed as a result of troubles in 1976. Thank you. We have two CRC reps in a row, Deirdre's former. Deirdre McBride is the next nominee. Deirdre has worked extensively on regeneration and Integration in North Belfast, was Chief Executive of the Belfast European Partnership, served in the Northern Ireland Policing Board, worked as Programme Director of Cultural Diversity for the Northern Ireland Community Relations Council, and is working still today on ethical remembering. Next is Brian Caskey from Belfast. Brian has been the project lead for the last 11 years at the Limestone United Cross Community Initiative. He was a serving police officer in North Belfast and developed the Sports Across the Interface intervention to support young people coming together at interfaces. Next is a local woman, Maureen Hetherington. Maureen was responsible for the Community Relations Programme for Derry City Council for 10 years and then worked in the Junction, a community relations and peacebuilding initiative set up to address the fragmentation in the field of peacebuilding. She has also worked on many other aspects, including ethical remembering. Next is Mary Bryan. Mary Bryan is in Manchester today, but obviously she's very familiar to this city as she works in Wales Women's Aid, and we have an event actually next Tuesday where we will pass on the award, and that's about gender coercive control by paramilitaries. And again, it shows you that in 2024 there's still criminal and paramilitary organisations who try to control women in their communities, which is unacceptable. And that piece of research is very, very important and timely. So we'll do that next week with Mary. Next is Pauline Ross. Pauline taught at primary school, by none other than Pat Hume. Pauline is the founder of the award-winning multidisciplinary arts centre, The Playhouse, and she was involved in many art and peace projects, including the Witness for Peace programme. I'm sure the next one I'll have the biggest cheer, but you've got the most fans here today, is Breezy Willow. Having previously worked on the Heritage in School scheme and her project Silly Books, Breezy now works in fostering peace and unity through Bake Bread for Peace initiative, which started in 2014. And you may have eaten some of her scones today, but when she was nominated, so many people have contacted me about attending today, so that's why our fan club is here. Congratulations, Breezy. Okay, next is Ivy Goddard. Woo! Ivy is project leader of the Ballymena Inter-Ethnic Forum, represents BME communities on the regional race equality subgroup. She's also the vice chair of the Strategic Alliance of Mid and East Antrim Borough Council and is a member of the Labour Market Partnership. She was awarded an MP in June 2013. Next is Julia Key. Julia is from a unionist community in Northern Ireland, but has worked in community development and good relations since 2002. Julia coordinated European peace-funded programmes, most recently with 800 young people across Northern Ireland border counties with YMCA Ireland. She has worked in peace building, a number of areas working for the YMCA and Gateway to Protestant Participation and the establishment of the Londonderry Bands for. That's the first kiss I've got today. What's wrong with the rest of you? Okay, next is Stevie Hughes. I'm enjoying this one, Stevie. Stevie took a bit of persuasion to accept this award, but he is accepting on behalf of the young people he's worked with. He's in his 41st year of service to children and young people, and now employed in St Peter's Immaculata in Lower Falls. He's always understood the impacts of working with young people living in contested communities those impacted by segregation and the sectarian division of Belfast Peace Walls.
Thanks, Doc.
Thanks, Stevie. The next, actually, they're individual, but they're going to be a double act, is Geraldine O'Kane and Kathy Rourke, because they work together in Whitewell Road in North Belfast. They are a sort of duet, and you're very welcome. They've worked together. Kathy's from the White City Community Development Association and Geraldine of Greencastle Community Empowerment Partnership together decided to form a new organisation that overarched between both communities and from this greater Whitewell community. They focus on the we rather than us and them. Okay, next is Eamon Dean, who's obviously from the city as well. Sally and Eamon Dean have been supporting each other to build peace in this community for over 5 decades. Together they have formed a formidable team committed to improving the lives of people locally. Eamon is an experienced educator and has worked for multiple organisations, notably Hollywell Trust from 1988 till 2014. Next is our second person from Donegal. It's PJ Hallinan. PJ has been involved in youth, sport and community on both sides of the border, including the management committee of Border Horizons, representing the southern side. After visiting the Somme, he decided to use the shared history of the 36th Ulster Division and the 16th Irish Division as a peace-building project, working with Meban Aberdeen Peace School, Inishowen Development Partnership, Fort Dunree and others. A border project called Youth 52 was set up and was hugely successful. Next is Dr. Frank Gavin, Emeritus Professor at Queen's University. He's been an academic for 40 plus years, including periods at 2 universities in the United States. He's been a governor advisor on strategies for employability, EU Peace Programme, urban programmes, and has worked with the Community Relations Council in the production of peace monitoring reports. He's most recently a Peace Guardian and has done a lot of work on shared space. And the last person is Jackie Redpath, who also can't be with us today, unfortunately, and he sends his apologies. But obviously Jackie, probably one of the better known nominees, has worked in redevelopment and regeneration of the Shankill area for many, many decades. Indeed, he's worked with Frank Gaffigan on many urban regeneration projects like Shave the Shankill campaign. His passion is education, and he established the Greater Shankill Partnership and created the Early Years Project in Shankill Road. Again, for Davy, Jackie and Mary, we will organise to hand over their individual certificates and presents at a later date.